welcome. Come on in. This is our Mental Wealth Mondays with Ashley Counseling. We are so happy to have Lissette Urióstegui. Am I saying that right? Because I've been practicing
It's a
it.
mouthful. Urióstegui.
Urióstegui. See, I said it was you. I had it the first time. Well, welcome. So Lissette is a counselor, licensed professional counselor with Ashe Counseling. She is accepting clients, so if you want to work with her, please visit our website and schedule an appointment with her. And we're so happy. I'm so happy that you chose this topic to discuss. And what we're going to be talking about today is the challenges and struggles children of immigrants face and how to manage those challenges, how we can support the community, and just and to explore this topic because I think it's very important. So welcome everyone. I see you guys coming on in. I have the comments open here, so please feel free to send your comments in the chat and we will get to them. So thank you, Lissette, for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am Mexican American. I'm also a child of immigrants, and so my folks are from Mexico. And so yeah, I'm a newer therapist with Ashe. And I wanted us to talk about. I picked this topic for our Mental Health Monday today because it's something that comes up a lot with the clients that I serve. It's just kind of like navigating the complexities of being a child of immigrants and kind of like what that means. A lot of the times it's a position that gives us a lot of opportunity because that's why our parents, came to this country, right? They want something better for their children, whether that's employment, whether that's education, quality of life. And then so we're presented with a unique opportunity, and then it's like, okay, and then we feel almost like thrown into it, like, okay, well, now what do I do? I'm in these spaces. And sometimes those spaces don't really feel like they're for us.
Yeah.
And so sometimes a lot of times with that will come things like imposter syndrome. So feeling like, am I even supposed to be here? And even structures that are designed to help us, right, to address inequities like having diversity and within companies and diversity of like culture and language and things like that. And then how those things that are set up for us to support us sometimes can even feel like they're hurting us, right? With that combined like with imposter syndrome, feeling like, did I really get into this university or get hired by this company because they wanted me and what I have to offer? Or, that doubt of like, oh, is this because of like a company, like, quota or diversity, initiative? And then it kind of challenges to think of like, at first it can feel like it's something like, did I truly get this spot? And at the same time, it's like, well, isn't it is a positive thing though, right? That companies and universities are seeing the discrepancies and the inequities and making a push to make sure we have a fair chance.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you bring that up because I think a lot of marginalized communities and cultures feel that way when there is this push for diversity hires or meeting quotas or affirmative action, and the idea, of just saying, okay, am I picked because of what I have to offer or who I am, or or reconcile that with, or was it like a diversity hire or a pick? Yeah.
And the thing is, like, historically, a lot of the times that's almost, and when you are unfortunate to be in a situation where maybe it's a culture that maybe has those things in place, but almost like, I see why they have that here, because it's not a lot of, diversity or even company policies that are reflective of like their staff and different kinds of things.
Oh. Yeah, and it's interesting what I'm seeing. I consult with other group practice owners, and one of the things that comes up a lot is diversity in mental health, and but making not only hiring clinicians who speak different languages or have different cultural backgrounds, but also making it a safe space. Because it's one thing to hire someone, right? But then also making it a safe space for them while they are employed with that company.
Right. And, you see it a lot more, especially lately with, as I want to say, like, particularly after like George Floyd, how companies respond to any kind of like cultural, like, sensitivity, awareness, race and ethnicity, and how really like the culture of like a company can like support, employees' mental health, or, make it worse, right? Some companies don't address racial and ethnic and cultural things until it's almost like, okay, well, we're going to have to address it because then someone's going to check that we didn't, right? It's almost like a checks box. Did we check on our Black and brown people? I mean, basically, right? And so like
Yeah.
these are things that like come up a lot, like in my sessions with my clients, is like kind of like navigating that, like the reality and like how things, how we would want things to be, like in the healthier way, like holistically, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't just go to work and turn that on. Like we take our full selves to work, or, university, what have you.
Yeah. Tell me about your maybe some personal experiences that you may have trying to navigate both of these worlds and maybe feeling like you have not belonged in a place.
Yeah. So I think that navigating in general, like for me, one of the most jarring experiences, like when I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign for undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of reflecting on how, being like a first generation college student and coming from like CPS, like elementary school and high school, shout out to CPS, I have great teachers and stuff along the way. And kind of seeing like, oh, well, seeing how your peers are maybe more prepared or better prepared, or things don't seem to be, it's just like, why does it seem to be I'm the only one that's struggling, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like a general thing that I've experienced, that like a lot of folks also experience. But when it comes to talking about like race and ethnicity, because even as, Mexican American, like that's just my basically my ethnicity and my nationality, right? I was born here from Mexican background. But then even just like, what are we race wise? That's a whole big conversation with like Latinos, because we're so diverse in terms of like the racial part. So I remember not knowing what the difference was until I had to write a paper on it in college.
Can you
Like, what
tell
is
us?
your race and ethnicity? Yeah.
Can you tell us? I know that's probably like a whole, like you said, that's probably a book or a whole class. But can you explain the differences maybe to people who don't know what you're talking about as far as
Sure.
like the race, yeah, within the community, yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, like even within our community, the way that I explain it, that kind of that hits the most is like even within like our like a cultural, like a Latino culture that has like a very big variance, I would say like Cuban or Puerto Rican, right? You see that it's very easy to see like, oh, like a Black Cuban or Afro-Cuban, Afro-Latino, right? And then like the white skin, light eyes, maybe sometimes light colored hair. Same thing, like could be Puerto Rican or Cuban. So those seem to be like the comparisons that I use a lot with like other Latinos, or especially like older Latinos, to explain how within like one culture, like you can have Afro Latinos and more like white presenting, or in the middle, like I'm brown, right? So what is brown? That's a
Right.
whole other question, right? And
Yeah.
so within our land communities, it's really just historical. Like we are indigenous peoples that were colonized by, the French, the Spanish, and other European countries, the U.S., when, they took pieces of Mexico, lots of pieces of Mexico. So we are kind of like a mix of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, it's really hard to pinpoint for us. And for that same reason, it's sometimes can come down to like, what do you prefer? You'd really have to tap back into your roots to say like, oh, there's a lot of indigenous roots in my family, or, oh no, like there's more Spanish or French, and everyone's really different. Like my last name is very unique. Like a lot of people would ask me growing up, where is that from? I have no idea until a coworker looked it up for me one day, like, and it was somewhere between Spanish and French. And I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense because Mexico,
Yeah. I had one of my questions wanted to ask you. It was just talking about the Latinx community and Latinx stories represented in the media, and how that impacts, with looking at these stories And just like in the African American community and other marginalized groups, where a lot of times we see ourselves reflected as criminals or drug dealers and all this kind of stuff. And now, hoping that, and how does that, impact your self-esteem? And what's really coming up, which is fresh, is the new Lin-Manuel's The Heights. I don't know if you've seen that. He's the guy.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and which is great. It seems to be, a Latinx cast, but then there's this controversy that there's no Afro Latinx community represented. And so, and how does that, impact, and I know you're not speaking for like every person, but how does that impact, self-esteem and all of that? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and a lot of times we forget about that part. We think like, oh, great, we have like Latina or Latino, Latinx representation. And then it's like, okay. And then at the same time, we almost can expect without even seeing, like, they're going to probably be like white passing or light skin, like Latinx folks, right? And so it's like, it's a step in the right direction. At the same time, it's still a conversation to like, well, where are our Afro-Latina, like, family. And it's exactly right what you said, like the representation. I have a goddaughter that is Black and Mexican. So when she, speaks Spanish and people just like whoop their heads like, what? Like, what's going on? And, for her, living in she lives in Wisconsin. So it's like a completely different like environment to where it's like, now there's no things that are represented. So you have to think, we have to think about folks like us that are in the city that maybe have a little more visual representation, but then in the media, where is that?
Right.
Can our, Black and brown kids see themselves being actors, actresses, like, can, things that they see on there?
Yeah.
So it's almost like an erasure of their existence, really.
Yeah, that's what what I kind of saw. I haven't saw it yet. I do plan on watching it because I did love Hamilton, and I did, wanted to see The Heights. But I did see some, because I think it just came out this weekend. So I did see people sort of giving that criticism that it's not diverse and the total Latinx community is not really represented. But that's a lot of pressure too. I can see on the flip side, like that's a lot of pressure on just, one, movie that's, out to represent, like you said, the Latin community is very diverse. Yeah.
Yeah. And then The Heights. So remind me, that's background what Heights?
So I think it's a community in New York that's primarily Latinx community, and but don't quote me.
And so and that was my question. I'm like, I want to say it's based in New York, and most people will tell you like New York is very full of like Dominican and Cuban and like ethnic like Caribbean even. And so it's like anybody that knows New York would know, like, the New Yorkers, Dominicans, and like, where are they? How are they not in here? And when you talk about it, it's like, oh, can't you just be happy that we have some kind of representation? Like, no, like it's not complaining. It's like, yes, this is good, and next time let's take this into consideration.
Yeah. I want to skip ahead because I know you have to go. I'm being mindful of your time. But I wanted to talk about the Latinx community and mental health.
Yeah.
And how can we, support the community, just like in the African American community, there's stigmas that and barriers to mental health. And Yvette just said Washington Heights and the cast is diverse in her opinion. Only a 5-star review here. She said always room for improvement. Thank you, Yvette. I mean, I just saw we both, our disclaimer, we haven't saw people did, I did see the complaints, but I haven't saw it. So thank you, Yvette, for clearing that up. I'm sure it's really good because I really like Lin-Manuel Miranda. So I'm pretty sure it's good, but thank you, Yvette. So let's talk about, mental health and tell me what your thoughts and how can we support the community and start erasing some of the stigma?
When it comes to mental health and like Latinos, like Latinx folks, like a lot of the main thing that comes into mind, especially when when it comes to like talking about our mental health with like our parents or elders or other family members is the idea that mental health means like something is wrong, right? And that's not exclusive to the Latinx community,
No,
right?
it's not. It's
So,
not.
and you know, and then the saying like, oh, estás loca, you must be crazy, or what's like almost which, you know, even with you know, not exclusive to the Latinx community, is this feeling like you need help, like you can't do it on your own and you need somebody else. And there's like an inherent shame in that sense. So I mean, one of the things that I would say is just kind of like the same thing with most folks like in the American like population. It's like they're to remove the stigma just in general of like mental health. Something that kind of is like apparent more like in the Latinx community is this idea that when you tell someone else your problems, you're kind of breaking that not secrecy, that what we say confianza, that trust of now you're telling your family's business, and like now you're speaking negatively of me, like, you know, parents will say that, or partners sometimes, right? Depending on where their mind's at. And you know, even with, you know, not exclusive to the Latinx community of like you know, you see so many memes and jokes about like parents joking like, oh, you're gonna go to therapy and blame everything on me. It's not the blame game. That's another thing too. Like when there's some kind of challenge or frustration, it's like, okay, well, who did it? Like, and so what's the consequence? And you know, that's something that we see like with the discipline in a lot of our families, like the harsh discipline, or sometimes like physical, like, you know, we hear about like the chanclazo is like throwing sandals and like physical punishment, and we laugh about it because that's the way that we've learned to cope with it, right? You know, laugh at my pain kind of thing, right? And so, and those kinds of things, while they can be like helpful, sometimes like they can be hurtful, right? Because we normalize it then.
Yeah.
And in the sense, yeah, but at the basis just would be, you know, supporting your Latinx like friends and family, just saying like, hey, like that's what therapy is for. Like when you've reached like your limits of like, okay, I'm not sure what to do next. Let me see what someone else might have to say.
Yeah. You know, and you know, talking about being a child of an immigrant, and I can imagine that, you know, possibly, and you know, excuse me if I'm making assumptions, that like mental health and therapy is really a westernized American, you know, thing. And so as you are, you know, going to school and being educated and being exposed to mental health and the benefits of mental health, how did you like becoming a therapist? What did your family say, you know, when you decided to become a therapist and to support you, or did they not understand the point of that?
So my dad to this day doesn't really believe in therapy, which is like funny because I'm like, okay, bye. You only paid for like my whole career, you know, college and stuff, which is, you know, for sure like a privilege that I have, right? And it's just kind of like my mom is a lot more understanding of it. And another thing too is like when you start to have more like access to like education or information about mental health, things start to click, like, oh, well, that's why, you know, things that maybe they would have categorized as like personality things, like, oh, like I'm an enojona, I'm moody, or things like that. They're saying like, oh, that's depression, oh, that's anxiety. Like it kind of just like with most folks, like it's just understanding. Once you have an understanding of what's going on, then you can see like, okay, this is not what I can do. But yeah, in general, like it's a big, you know, almost like no for some families to seek mental health services. If you throw in the mix how religious a family might be, like their first choice might be like a pastor or a priest, right? Or like counseling within like their church community. Yeah, so those are some challenges.
So how can someone in that position sort of break that stigma, or you know, go ahead and give, you know, mental health services a try? I mean, we will operate from a culture of humility, so we respect like, if someone, you know, does want to see their priest or their pastor, you know, instead of a therapist, we support that, right? If that's, you know, what you're the expert of your own culture, we can't tell you what's right for you. But if someone wants to explore mental health in a different way, such as seeing a therapist, sort of the medical way, or westernized way, how can someone break free of that without the, I guess, backlash of the or lack of support of their family?
Something that I discuss a lot with folks, even once I get someone as a client, there's still like almost like a guilt for being in therapy. It's
Mm-hmm.
like almost like my parent, and this is something that I think it's kind of unique to being a child of an immigrant, is like the pressure, right, of all of this sacrifice that our parents did to come here or to stay here or what have you. And then like, so what are we going to do with that? Like, are we going to go to school? Are we going to get that degree that they're, they want us to push for? Because a lot of our immigrant families think or believe, right, the American dream. You get an education, you get a degree, and you get a job, and that's you're set. And a lot of us are realizing like that's not really the reality of things, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like those kinds of challenges. So just kind of also remembering that one of the privileges that we have as children of immigrants is to be able to have a different kinds of set of challenges, a different kind of different things to work on. We're not focused on survival like our parents might be, right? Like our parents might be just grateful to have a job, right? Because for whatever reasons, we have the unique opportunity to now worry about quality of life. Like, am I happy in my job? Like, do they support me? Do I feel valued? Like, is my identity valued? Like, as like whether that's bicultural person, multilingual person, LGBTQ, community member person. So like all of those things. And then we have like a guilt, right? Like, why am I complaining when like I have an okay salary or I live in a certain okay place? And there's like that guilt. And it's like, well, that's actually like what your parents worked for. If you really think about it, like they didn't want you to have the same struggles they did.
Right.
Now you have the privilege of improving your quality of life.
Right. So, because you
That's
don't,
privilege.
there's always this idea that, oh, it could be worse, right? It could
Right.
be, this, that, no, you couldn't have a job, you're complaining about a job and, and things like that. But so you're saying you focus, like when you do have clients that struggle in that way, you focus on, it sounds like on gratitude, and this
Right.
is, you try to help them reframe that guilt.
Yeah, I joke around a lot to say like, the attitude of gratitude can go a long way. With the caveat of sometimes when you're really in it, like in like a pit of like maybe like a depressive episode or just like in a really negative mindset, sometimes attitude of gratitude is going to be really hard to dig up because it's almost patronizing, which is something that like I'm grateful that I've been able to point that out with some folks, because then it's like, well, that almost feels like toxic positivity sometimes, right? So just kind of explaining like, well, no, it's a privilege that it's a privilege, a different kind of privilege. It doesn't feel like one, right? Like navigating these spaces for the first time, like first generation. But it is.
Yeah. How can we, in the Latinx community, how can we start to dispel some of these stigmas because just like everyone, I think, everyone could benefit from therapy at some point in their life. And so that, how can we start to dispel some of that?
One thing I would that I find kind of helps unravel a lot of that is a discussion wherever the person might be at in the understanding of machismo, sexism, and how like our gender roles are in our culture, because that plays a really large part on one, like whether we even speak up about our challenges, right? Like, sexism, machismo, like it hurts both, it hurts everybody. It hurts the women that are taught, there's an expression, calladita te ves más bonita. When you're quiet, you look prettier. And so we're taught that as women. My arm just got a little
that kind of sting a little bit there.
right. Yeah, and so this is a saying that's really common in our community, like calladita te ves más bonita. So like just zip it and calm and proper, right? And for men, be strong, right? Don't complain. Like there's your priorities are work and providing from your family. So like for your family. So how do these gender roles like hurt, and how do they kind of lay the foundation to not talk about your challenges, to not seek support? And how do those things even influence like how likely we are to experience like an abusive relationship, right? If we're teaching our girls to not speak up and to defer, like to defer to men or to serve men, right? A big thing in our Latino culture is the women serving the men, like serving them a plate of food, right? Or the idea that, and this is not exclusive to like the Latinx community, but like the idea that like, oh, your husband took care of the kids, like, oh, how lucky you are. It's like, well, they're a parent too, you know, kinds of things. The expectation that everything is on a woman. What kind of relationship is that prepping us for, right? As children of immigrants, like that might have been like the norm for our parents back in their countries of origin, but now that we're here, we're seeing like, hey, like there's a better way. And when you talk about those things, sometimes it can be seen as like, oh, you're being disrespectful. Oh, that's like your American stuff or your new generation stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask that if you hear that, like, oh, that's, you're becoming too Americanized, or that word is coming up. Yeah, that's interesting. And like you said, that's, we could say that, apply that to a lot of different cultures. And just, I guess, American way of thinking about things. I thought about, like, we were working on a partnership with Ghana. And the person that I was consulting with, about delivering mental health services in Ghana, they said, well, first thing, you got to train your therapist. Don't tell them to start talking back to their parents or talking back at work if they don't like their jobs, and to say, well, you need to, that American, well, you need to stand up for yourself in that way. And even though you're you're teaching them how to advocate and all this stuff that we do talk about during mental health sessions, but this is not the culture there, and you could get someone almost kind of hurt in a way. You might put them in danger, telling them to do these things that is maybe a little bit more normal here. How, what about the people who immigrated, here, and, giving them that support? This, culturally is different. The language is different. And I can imagine anxiety comes up, depression comes up, maybe even some PTSD. How can we support the immigrants that are here?
Right. And so that's it basically starts with a conversation, right? And almost like, so like, like I mentioned a little earlier, that the challenge can sometimes be just addressing these things can be seen as disrespectful, right? So when it comes to that, it's really just discussing like, what are the reasons why I want to have this conversation, right? I'm not wanting to just be challenging just to be challenging. And sometimes when children of immigrants want to have these conversations with these conversations with their elders, it's met with like, well, okay, so like almost like the elders like shut down if there's no agreement. And because of the way that we're taught to not be confrontational, to respect our elders, and to not it feels like we're arguing if we want to express the way that we see the world and how we feel. So I focus a lot on I statements. So like, that's one thing. Like, I feel blank when blank. So, I feel, I feel sad when we can't talk about like some things that are bothering me because we don't agree. Like, I would want to go to you as someone for support. Or, even just explain like, I know, I think sometimes you don't like when I bring up X, Y, and Z, type things. The reason why I bring them up is because like, I want to have a better relationship with you. And I want to I know how you think, or I know how the things that you believe, and I understand, and here's some other information, right? I always encourage like to try to remove like the buts, because whenever we put in a but into a sentence, it's like whatever we said before, it doesn't matter. Like, I love you, but it's like, ooh, okay, now what? Like, what's the condition almost, right? Like, if you didn't believe X, Y, and Z, then it would be different.
Yeah. I love that I statement. I use that a lot with clients, especially talking about with couples. So, people out there, if you're looking for ways to have hard conversations, you could use this with your partner, you could use this with a friend, and using those I statements really, puts people's defenses down, because it's immediately when you say you did or you said, and even though it's true, that person's defenses go up. But when you say I, then that wall comes down and they're more likely to listen and to hear what is about, what's going on. So that's a great tool. Any other tool for, children of immigrants to, sort of cope with, this, what they're going through and the struggles and the challenges that we talked about earlier?
Yeah. In general, like, well, the most general like coping skills I like to use, because like I tell folks, like, we're in therapy because there's some stressors going on. The goal is for ultimately for you to not have to see me, right? I want my clients to be self-sufficient. I want them to have all the coping skills to be able to adapt, right, for whatever comes up. Like, I always recommend diaphragmatic breathing. It's not the same kind of breathing like that we're used to. It helps to like lower your heart rate for when you're feeling like that anxiety or discomfort or nervousness. It helps to calm it down so you can stay more like in your rational brain, like when you're having a conversation.
Can you explain to or we got quite a few people on all these different channels. So can you explain to them like what that is and how they can implement that? Yeah.
So when we breathe, when you go to the doctor and you say like, oh, take a deep breath. The first thing you do is like we lift our chest, right? But our chest is, contained by a rib cage that doesn't expand. But what does expand is like the area right under, which would be like our diaphragm area. So like I'll sit up a little bit more. So it'll just be like right here, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing the diaphragmatic breathing, I recommend doing it starting laying down. And so you're retraining your body to, when you're breathing in through your nose, you kind of push your tummy out like a balloon. And then you hold it for a few seconds, and then you let it go through your mouth, and then your belly deflates. So it's like you're exchanging the air in your body. And so what I recommend is trying this laying down with a pillow over your tummy, so you can see, like, practice pushing your belly out for when you inhale, and letting it deflate, like your belly go down when you exhale through your mouth.
Okay.
And so it takes practice. It's not how we're used to breathing. I almost always like give this as homework on the first session or the second session, because I want folks to practice it for when they need it. They already know how to do it. It's kind of like riding a bike. You want to learn how to ride the bike in case you need it for an emergency, like a transportation. You don't want to learn that day that you need it.
Yeah. And you said that this can be used to help manage anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety, depression, like any kind of, like, when you're feeling like in Spanish, like alterada, like you're feeling maybe like you're nervous, or your heart rate are fidgety, or you're noticing that you're worrying. A lot of times, like for me, my cue to do that is like when my leg starts tapping. Mm-hmm. So I know, like, oh, I'm restless. Let me take a deep breath. What am I anxious about? Sometimes the physical cues will help to tell you, like, something's off. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, it's so important also to know, when you're feeling anxious. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that they're more anxious than not. Right. Sometimes it looks like, maybe just, like the butterflies in your stomach, or your palms start to sweat, or you might have shortness of breath, and you just, you don't realize that that's anxiety. And you can trick your body by doing different type of breathing exercises to say that you're safe, because our body thinks that we're not safe for whatever reason. Our thoughts are telling our body that. And so our body thinks that, oh, we need to start to panic, and using those breathing techniques can really help trick our body to saying, okay, you're safe, you're okay.
Well, you say trick, but it's actually to remind your body that you're okay, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a trick. You're tricking it in the moment because it feels very real, like that danger, panic.
Yeah. I like that. Remind your body. I'm going to start saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other tools or any other tips that you can share with our audience?
I mean, for sure, YouTube, look up diaphragmatic breathing. That is, like, I think it's a tool that could help like so many people, aside from meditation, like to calm down our thoughts, right? Because like you said, a lot of people have anxiety or anxiety type symptoms, and they don't realize it because maybe they've been able to make accommodations or adjust around it, right? Even myself as a therapist, like not realizing, like, wow, I've had anxiety, like, I think since like I was probably like a teenager or something. I've just been able to adapt around it until I couldn't, right? And that's really what, diagnoses are. It's just like when you go to therapy, it's like, okay, I've been able to manage until I'm not able to. Now I need support.
Yeah. Yvette asks, how important is it to get good sleep or try to take something or try to take something or do an exercise before bed? I only recently realized how important sleep is for my mental health.
Oh, it's paramount. So when you're sleeping, that's really when your body is like regenerating. It's when your body, all of your bodily functions, your organs are kind of like resetting and kind of processing the day, but your mind is too. And so that's why one good measure of how good sleep you are getting, the most obvious is how rested you feel in the morning, right? But also,
Mhm.
like if you're dreaming, and if not everybody remembers their dreams or what it was, but when we're dreaming, that's when we have the deep sleep. That's when we're in REM sleep. That's when our body is, our brain is like going over everything that happened in the day. And that's why people will say, like, oh, if you have a big decision or you're stressed, sleep on it. And the reason for
Mhm.
that is because your brain is going to mull it over while you're unconscious. Um, and so it's really important to get that sleep because the consistent sleep will make for less anxiety because your body isn't kind of trying to figure out, like, where am I in the day? Am I rested enough? Um,
Mhm.
Exercise is good to do. In general, stretching is really good to do before bed.
Mhm.
Um, Stretching, because think about it, your body is going to be like immobile in one position, or depending how much you move at night too, right?
Mhm.
But stretching before you go to sleep is one really good thing that helps to be relaxed and ready to fall asleep.
Yeah, you want to be careful too, right? Of like high intensity exercise before bed
Right.
because it takes some time for your body to sort of slow down.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure you're not doing anything that's
Nothing
gonna,
strenuous, right?
yeah,
Like if
nothing
you know,
strenuous.
it might energize your body to keep going, and then it's counterproductive, right? Some people are different, right? We're all different. Some people say like, no, tiring myself in the gym, taking a shower, and then I knock out. So
Yeah,
it depends on the
that's
person.
important. It's important to really know, know your body and know what works for you. And of course, if she said mentioned something about taking something, I'm always like try the natural ways
Right.
first.
Chamomile tea, lavender.
Yeah,
Get lavender scented stuff. If you're someone that likes to shower or bathe before bed, getting the lotion, lavender
yeah.
scented.
Melatonin, that's very, that's all natural. You can get that in a gummy form. That's, that sometimes I recommend that to people. Of course, consult with your doctors
Right.
before all of this. You want to make sure that you can do that. Yeah.
Hmm. And then like
And
even within like our like different kind of like immigrant communities, they might have other remedies, right? Like so chamomile tea is one that you hear a lot. There's different kinds of teas that like are, different communities are like, oh, this one's good for sleep, this one's good for stress, or if you're scared, like susto. So there's a lot of cultural things that we forget that we're kind of naturalists culturally, like with herbs and things like that.
yeah. So how can we support the Latinx community in dealing with some of these the struggles that we talked about today?
I and just reminding that they're not alone, right? We feel like and a lot of times we feel like we're alone because in our family we might be the only one that is the first one navigating all these things. Especially, if you're sometimes if you're the oldest, you have the first opportunity. Every family is different, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's just kind of reminding them that they're not alone and that there are other people that have these same challenges, and to not be so hard on ourselves, right? Because sometimes we feel like we have to be the saviors of our family.
Mhm.
We feel like we're the representation, right? Like we have to show something for, why they came here, to this country. And we, a lot of children of immigrants will like agree, like, I am my parents' retirement plan. Like that's, there's a lot of pressure on me. Like, so it's not just a perceived thing, it's very real. So saying,
Where
okay,
where
I'm with
does the pressure come from? Is this real pressure that you're hearing from family members, or is it perceived pressure?
It's almost like an unspoken pressure, right?
Okay.
A lot of times, like every family is different. A lot of times, our elders they don't actually ask us for things. They might actually just say. So I'll give a small example. Like my dad often will say, like, if we're having dinner, like, oh, like, where's the salt shaker? or like maybe this needs a little more salt or something like that. Translation: somebody get me salt.
Okay.
Right. So we're a lot of the times we're quick to we learn, right? I wanted to say train, but we learned to pick up on the nonverbal cues and things like that, because like our elders, a lot of times they don't know, because that was their cultural experience. You don't speak up for what you need. And so when you think about your family, your parents, and then you see your peers, right? People talk about 401k and retirement plans and inheritances, and it's like, well, all of those things start with me, right? They might have that, but they don't have the other stuff. They don't have they might not have the generational wealth, or they might not have the knowledge to get resources, right? So a lot of the times we feel like, well, I'm the best chance that my family has to make enough money to support myself, and so my parents are taken care of.
Yeah.
So it's like a double pressure for ourselves and for our family.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially as your parents and your family members age, and navigating healthcare systems, for
Right.
anyone is challenging. We start talking about insurances and all of that. In normal circumstances, not even talking about COVID circumstances, but no normal circumstances, and to also have to make sure that you're assisting in that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's a learning process for everyone. And then when since especially when there's like a language barrier, if the elders don't speak English, or not enough English, you're kind of the spokesperson, since you're a child. So you're given the position of expert when you really don't know anything, right? And so there's sometimes a frustration, like when we're doing things for our elders and they don't they feel like it's taking too long, or they don't understand, and it's like, well, I'm trying to figure it out for you or with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it can be, yeah, that's one of the challenges for sure.
So what can you share with someone who may be going through that, or may be going through that? How can you manage that, and helping your parents, or helping the elders in your family, but then also managing your own stress and anxiety as they're going through some challenges?
Especially if it's someone that maybe doesn't have that support within like their family network, is definitely keeping connected to your extended like social network. So whether that's your friendships, whether that's sometimes that's people from work, kind of just feel out like who you can confide in, someone that's in a similar situation, because that's a big reason why I have a lot of clients that are either first generation or also like multicultural. It's kind of navigating that, like how do I do that, like, and how do I do that in a respectful way.
Yeah. And how do you set boundaries? That's like a big,
Right.
big, big word right now. But how do you set boundaries when you're in that situation?
I like to remind everyone to just bring it back to love. It all goes back to love. Like, if I'm putting these boundaries, that's because I want to keep you in my life, right? I
Hmm.
want These are certain things that I'm working on myself. Like, I want to love myself more, and so part of loving myself more is making sure, how do I talk to myself? What kind of negative self-talk do I have? Do I tell myself? But also the outside, right? That I have more control of, and I want to keep you in my life. And so these are some things that maybe I didn't say that bothered me in the past. Now I'm learning to be more assertive. I'm learning, my power, however you want to explain it, right? And one of those things is like, I want to have a better relationship with you, and this is how.
Yeah,
Like, is this something that we can, like, that can change, right? For us to keep having a relationship.
yeah. This was really good. I'm being mindful of our time. So thank you so much. I think we could just end it right there, ending it with love and remembering to operate from love. One of my favorite lines is that every interaction we have with someone,
Um,
Okay, we're back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We went out a little bit, but I was saying that ending with love and operating from love. I think that is key when we are talking about our intentions. Sorry about that. We see you guys. Sorry about
It's
that.
usually me. So I live by Midway, even with the full bars, like my internet's. I'm like, I'm just gonna be patient. It's probably me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Any final words before we get out of here?
No, I mean, if anyone watching has any questions or anything like in particular, one thing that I didn't really address today, or it could be another day, right? But one thing that someone commented, like the chancla culture, like how even like child rearing and how that works in our culture is so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if no one has any questions, then I think.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of good responses here in the chat. This was great. I think we might have to do this again because
Yeah.
part two of this, because like you said, we did it's so much that we did get a chance to discuss. So I would love to have you back, and I'll let you guys know when we will come back again. But thank you so much, Lissette. And like I said, she is available if you are interested in working with Lissette. You can do so. You can go to our website. I'll post it in the comments, and you can schedule an appointment with her. Thank you so much. This was great.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.